Hello and welcome to Big Picture Monday. My name is Cali Black, here with all the context you need to totally rock this week's Come Follow Me readings. This week we are studying Doctrine and Covenants, sections 121 through 123. These three revelations are excerpts from a letter that Joseph wrote in Liberty Jail. Now, if you're wondering, wait a second, I thought we were happy in Far West last week. How are we in Liberty Jail right now? The worst experience. Let's fill in the gaps a little bit. And by fill in the gaps a little bit, I mean literally just a little bit. There are full books that have been written that you could read and study on what happened. But here's to sum it up. Last week, if you were with me, I was building that joy, right? The Saints were so excited to be in Far West, Missouri. And they really felt like they were going to be in their own space and not encroaching on anybody else. And they weren't going to have trouble from anyone else. And the Lord asked them to build a temple in Far West. They lay down the cornerstone. This is in the summer of 1838. Things are looking so hopeful. And yet, very shortly after that, opposition starts to arise. The people that live around them, who are not members of the church, are starting to have issues with them. Opposition is starting. And there start to be a lot of violence. There starts to be a lot of violence to the point where there are even a few deaths. This ends up being called the Mormon-Missouri War. Some battles and skirmishes take place. There's a lot of fear and anxiety and worry that the Saints are going to be attacked by people. Just a lot of stuff is going on. This is all throughout the fall of 1838. And it eventually culminates with the Missouri governor issuing an order that says that all Mormons need to leave Missouri. Otherwise, they will be exterminated. This is known as the extermination order. So this is when it's issued, feeling justified because there were lots of reports of battles. Some of the reports were much exaggerated in what actually happened. But the governor is hearing this and he says, get the Mormons out or you have permission to put them to death. And this leads to a surrender. Joseph, Hiram Smith, Sidney Rigdon, Lyman White, Caleb Baldwin, and Alexander McCrae were the 6 leaders who surrendered to the Missouri State Militia. The Missouri State Militia then took over Far West. Now, this was in the late fall time of 1838 as the state militia takes over Far West and did terrible things as they were taking over the town and taking control. But because it was so late in the year, the Saints pleaded with the state militia to let them stay in Far West through the winter and that they would leave as soon as the winter was over. So they did have permission to stay in Far West, but their leaders surrendering to the state militia didn't realize that the state militia was going to then arrest them and take them away, and they did. And so starting in December 1838, these 6 men that I just mentioned were placed in a county jail in Liberty, awaiting a trial. And the judge that had overseen the initial hearing, very biased and not a fair trial. They didn't have the trial yet, just this hearing initially. And these 6 men were told to be held in county jail while they awaited their trial. So from December to April of 1839, these 6 men, although Sidney Rigdon did get an early release because of his old age, so 5 by the end, endured unspeakable tragedies. You're probably maybe familiar with this. They were in the basement of Liberty Jail. They could not even stand up fully. They were not given adequate food at all. They were not given adequate water. The guards that were there were despicable, said terrible things, acted terribly towards them. Terrible circumstances. And then add on top of this the fact that these men are sitting in jail knowing what the women and children and other people in Far West are having to endure at the same time. And as these letters are coming through from Far West, and as the Saints are allowed to stay there a little longer, but what they're still having to endure with the occupation from the state militia of Missouri. Can't even put into words the tragic depths at this point, right? Especially after the spiritual highs of we've finally made it. We finally have freedom in Far West to do what we want. Tragedy, absolute tragedy. And yet in March 1839, so this is towards the end of Liberty Jail, Joseph writes a huge letter to the church at large. It is specifically addressed to Bishop Edward Partridge. But this letter contains prophecies, teachings from the Lord, Joseph's own advice to the saints of what they should be doing. And portions of this letter were circulated widely throughout the saints as soon as it was received in Far West. And eventually, 3 portions of this letter were canonized as sections 121, 122, and 123. So the 3 sections we read this week are portions of this letter that Joseph Smith himself penned from Liberty Jail. You're probably familiar with some of the teachings in some of these sections, but other ones are not as popular, I would say, and are interesting to review. Section 121, let's start with that. This portion of the letter starts with Joseph's own words. Starts with his own words, and he is pleading with the Lord for mercy, for relief. And then Joseph shares the Lord's response to him, promising peace right now and beautiful blessings. And the Lord also talks about how priesthood power should be used. Section 122, this portion of the letter is the Lord's words to Joseph again, and a bit of a prophecy, prophesying that Joseph's name would be known throughout all nations. And then the Lord teaches Joseph that the Savior himself descended below it all, below anything that Joseph is experiencing. The Savior has descended below that. And finally, section 123, this is more of Joseph's advice and teachings to the saints. He's telling them to gather all of their materials and evidence for what is happening in Far West so that they can present a legal case later down the road. So those are the revelations, the sections, I guess. It's kind of unique. It's not like 3 revelations, but this letter is clearly a mixture of revelation and prophecy and Joseph's feelings and the Lord's feelings. So I recommend as you read through, just kind of maybe categorizing. I think that's a helpful way to study of like, is this something the Lord is saying? Is this something Joseph is clearly saying? And just trying to wrestle with the words and see what messages resonate with your heart at this time. As I said, this lasted until April 1839. At this point, Joseph and the others were able to prove that they weren't going to be able to have a fair trial in Liberty County. The judge himself was already very biased, and so they were able to get approved to transfer to a different county, which meant a different set of guards, and these guards actually really liked their 5 prisoners at this point in time. And so at one point, while they were transferring over to a new area, the guards basically told the men, hey, we're going to go to sleep right now. Wink, wink, nod, nod. You know what to do. Allowing these 5 men to escape and head to find where the rest of the saints had left to, because they were no longer in Far West at this point. And we will talk about that more next week. All right, it's your turn. Dive into these. Sometimes they can be like heavy sections to study, but they're also just so uplifting. In fact, it reminds me a lot of the themes we heard at General Conference recently, this idea that peace can be found and peace can be made even in the darkest of times and the worst of situations. I think that's a powerful lesson that we all need over and over and over again. And Joseph Smith clearly needed it at the lowest point for him. He referred to this point as a huge turning point for him personally. So I can confidently say this is his lowest point. And I think we all need that reminder in our low and lowest points as we experience life as well. By the way, if you teach Relief Society or Elders Quorum, if you teach conference talks, like Elder Stevenson's or Elder Gong's that talk about these themes, or Elder Suarez's. I am really excited. I've actually started a new Instagram account called Teach the Talk. So make sure you're following Teach the Talk, and I give lots of, it's just free, it's fun, lots of advice and teaching tips on how to teach all of the talks from October 2025's General Conference. I'm working through all those right now. So make sure to follow that if you teach General Conference talks, or you know someone who does. Make sure to send them my way, because it's been a fun account to start. I think my personal focus question for this week is along the same lines. How can I make sure to find peace even when there seems to be darkness around me, whether that's darkness in the world events, or just really hard times personally? How can I still make sure that I can have peace being unto my soul now? Not in the future. I don't have to wait for relief, but peace can be in my soul now, just as the Lord promises Joseph. All right, have a great week this week, and happy studying.